People seem to take life easier than they do now. We didn't think anything about it, but we did put in quite a number of hours in the day.
We didn't have all the modern stuff, TVs and so on and so forth in days, you know. But we had a good time. When I'd come up here, every 2 weeks there'd be some farmhouse that would have a barn dance. We'd have a good time. And they'd make pink lemonade and all that kind of stuff. Boy.
Right, everybody was busy, right? Come berry time, Jesus, everybody was heading for here, or where the old woodlot where they cut off, picking a bunch of, go get berries and this and that, always busy. Gotta get your sugar wood up, summer wood and your garden and stuff. Yeah, we didn't go ramming around much.
Well, it was a tussle. It was a battle for survival. Very little money in those days. The first job my dad had, he worked all summer, haying. All we got out of it was a 2-tine pitchfork.
Little kid or anything else, God, they all begun to learn. Danny, they didn't just let them out there and stand there and look at you.
My grandfather had an orchard of 500 trees. And I remember when I was a very small child, he took me when he went shoeing one day. And he took us the oxen, and we went up to the sugar orchard. And at noon, he made coffee and boiled eggs in the syrup. I don't think I ever drank milk as a child. I started to drink coffee when I was 5 years old.
Back in those days, people worked more in the location where they were, instead of traveling, you know, a few miles away from home like we do now with cars. So whatever was available for work or labor, why they would do it in that area. There were a lot of little sawmills. Some of them, most of them were water powered, and they had their lumber that they shipped out. I remember they'd load it onto horses, sleds, or wagons and carry it down to Williamsville Depot, and then it would go on the railroad from there.
Of course, they did exchange work a lot. That's another thing we used to do years ago was exchange work. You know, one farmer helped the other one out, and then go healthy, back and forth. Made the work a little lighter and more interesting. You remember the husking parties they used to have up in Dover? I went to one or two up in Dover one time. And of course, when you get the colored ears, well, you had the right to kiss the prettiest woman in the crowd, when you got those colored ears. Yeah.
Oh, we worked out. It was all working, raising something. I remember having half of the field down here one time, all in field corn. So have your own corn to feed your pigs and stuff. A little corn for your horse.
When we went down Monday morning, we'd get up before light in the wintertime, get down to Dover Village, and they'd have a coach drawn with horses, and it would be closed in on the sides, and we'd go down, they'd stop down to the post offices all the way down. It was a cold ride before light when we...
You didn't have to have a road so that you could drive cars over it in those days. The horses would go on top of the snow. You'd get around with your sleighs and sleds.
Had rollers.
Well, they rolled the road. After every snowstorm, just pack it down, and then the traffic itself would pack the snow down harder. Cars couldn't do that, so someone invented the idea of plowing them. That's why we get into all the trouble now.
Well, the old horse days, I never liked horses very much. I grew up in the beginning of the automobiles. I probably was probably 5 years old when I first rode in an automobile.
All dirt roads, but let me tell you something. Those roads were kept up good. I had a bicycle back the last few years I was up here. And you'd ride on those roads, it was just like riding on a cement road or just like glass. They'd be as smooth as could be, see. In 1914, I rode a bicycle over to Keene from South Newfane. And they were all dirt roads everywhere. They didn't start hardening roads until the beginning of the 20s.
Billy there said the narrow gauge, 18 ton on a car. We said that was about their limit. It was stone. But after they got into wide gauge, they used to have a way bigger stuff. The last company that quarried the mountain up here, they got out some big arches there for some city somewhere. You can just remember seeing them go down, one stone on a car.
I have recollection of the day I began school. I remember the teacher that I had. His name was Charlie Brown. I remember standing beside a chair where he was sitting, and he was pointing out the words for me to recite. I'd already learned the letters of the alphabet from one of the neighbors. He paid me a penny for each letter that I learned, and I finally got the 26 cents.
I went to the little district school there and some other places. When I came down here to school, I was way ahead of the pupils in the 8th grade in history and grammar, but I couldn't do arithmetic. And they didn't succeed in teaching me arithmetic down here. In fact, I've never learned it.
And then, of course, deer season, a lot of the kids didn't go to school, you know. That's a holiday up here for them. Anybody could go out and get their deer back in those days, because it was plentiful.
Never went to school a hell of a lot, any time I could get out of it. As I told one fellow, gosh, he said, I didn't know you could split elm. And I said, oh yes, elm will split, you know how. And I said, it's not education, it's knowledge.
Because for years there, you didn't do nothing on Saturday afternoon and Sunday. Saturday afternoon was ball game time, and Sunday you didn't play ball, you didn't do anything else. If you did anything, you went to church, and that was it. I remember when it was a sin for young people to walk up and down the street on Sunday and laugh. They got lambasted and told what was and everything else.
Down in Williamsville here, they'd have a parade, 4th of July parade. And Townsend, Brattleboro. And they'd have a band that they might rent from someplace, you know, see. A lot different than today when they have a parade. Boy. Of course, if some great speaker came, oh, people would come from miles around, horse and buggy. People came from a radius of 25 or 30 miles around and camped up there.
There was a circus once a year, and some of them was big. When I was a young fellow, all circuses had a wild man from Borneo. And when I was a teenager, I kind of wished I could go to Borneo. I figured that if there's wild men in Borneo, there'd be some wild women there. But
convenience is not as good now as it was then. The stage that she talks about going to high school on used to go from East Dover to Williamsville Depot twice a day. So there was 2 times each day that you could go to Williamsville Depot and meet a train, either going north or south.
I guess I'd take away the cars and all the noise and all the commotion. Have it peaceful and big mowings, and I like see land. It just encroaches on you, this forest. It looks pretty peaceful to see cows all around, and sheep feeding, and instead of having a house on every little piece of land that they can put a house on.
Go more now, you never know when they're going or where they're going. And before they used to pull up on the side end, chat, and then go along. Keep track of one another, whether he's sick or something. If he's sick, we'll take turns, open, help get his work done. I've been out many a time to help someone else.
Things were different. I mean, you knew everybody, and there isn't a thing anyone wouldn't do to help you in need.
I think it was a very peace-loving town. I can't remember any crime. Certainly not conditions as they are today. And children have so much more now than they used to have in the old days. Now, every child has a bicycle, and those were very rare. Only the rich had bicycles. But in those days, I don't think it was felt the children had to be amused every minute. They found their own amusements. And when you think of what is being done for the children now, in comparison to almost nothing back in those days, it's a sort of a strange difference.
Things have changed, boy, and whether it's for the better, I have my doubts.